Men do not care if you're R-worded. They don't care if you're abused. They don't care if you're harassed. They don't care if you're stalked. They don't care if you're unalived. It is so evident that these men do not care about the well-being when it comes to the responses and the reactions that these men are having with all of this Diddy and Cassie trial evidence unfolding. The women clearly have an understanding of empathy. They are actually able to meet Cassie where she is at and understand that these were not F-offs, because I don't know if they're going to let me say the word on here. These are not F-offs. This is abuse, okay? This is straight up AB. This is straight up someone harming another person. Yet the only thing that these men can give towards the conversation is, well, she would have never let a man do that if he was broke. Oh, I wonder what her husband must be thinking, when she's exposing all of these stories, when she's talking about all these things. If I was her husband, I would just get a divorce. I don't want to be with a woman that's done all those things. She literally filed the lawsuit while she was married. She literally was 4 years into her marriage when she filed the lawsuit against Diddy. Which means she married a man that she felt safe enough with, comfortable enough with, to even do this in the first goddamn place. Men don't feel an ounce of remorse for Cassie because they're jealous of the fact that they don't have enough money and enough power and enough influence to do the same shit that Diddy did to her. And once they hear about a woman going through what she went through, they look at her as damaged. They look at her as tainted. No one's going to want you. Yes, because that's how they play the game. They literally get you, they taint you, discard you, and pray and hope that no one else will want you after that. Their whole full intent is to do so much damage to you emotionally, mentally, physically, financially. Their whole goal is to do so much damage to you that no one else will want you. That is the full completion level of conquering to them. These men are so pissed off and so jealous of the fact that Diddy's level of debauchery that he did towards Cassie did not stop her from finding a partner that actually genuinely loves her and cares about her. These men are fucking disgusting. These men are insidious, and you need to quit being in contact with them. These men only want to suck you dry and laugh about it later.
So, you all saw that video, but I'm going to break down exactly what is happening with these men, and some of them are actually women that are so invested in shifting the blame on Cassie for what happened. We live in a society where people really have a hatred for the victims, especially if you're in the West, because we have these documentaries about serial killers and they do very well, and people somehow find a way to relate to the perpetrators or the abusers over the victims. And with documentaries about serial killers or serial unalivers like Jeffrey Dahmer, nobody really thinks about the victim because the story is all about them. And I noticed this trend in Hollywood where all the villains, the abusers are having their stories being told, and it's like they are trying to replace the hero with the villains. Everything is inverted, but I digress. So I'm going to use this book to help me with my analysis and share with you all what I think about this. Okay, so the name of this book is The Map of Consciousness, and it's by the author David R. Hawkins. All right, this is what he looked like. Let me know if y'all can see him. Great work. The biggest issue here, ladies, is a lack of empathy. Okay, the absence of empathy. When I'm done with this video, you are going to think twice before you interact with any man moving forward. And if you're a spiritual woman, if you're a high vibrational woman, you would be able to understand what I'm saying in this video. Like, what I'm saying in this video is going to resonate, and it's going to explain why it's difficult for spiritual women or women that have done the shadow work to date, because most people are not on your level vibrationally speaking. The last video that I did, where I talked about why women no longer find men attractive, there were a lot of angry men in that comment section, and I'm not surprised because they never come to the conversation with understanding, reasoning, or anything like that. Those are very high consciousness levels, okay? Because it takes effort to get to those levels. All right, they usually come with shame, anger, pride, arrogance, ego, and some of them even threaten violence. Somehow, a picture of the map of consciousness is not in the book. There are tables and stuff like that, but this picture right here, which really explains it really well, is not in the book. So I'm going to put the picture here somewhere, or put it up where you guys can see it, and I'll talk over it. Just quickly pause the screen, take a screenshot if you want. I'm going to be referring to this image right here, which represents the map of consciousness, okay? The people that we're going to be talking about are the people that are going to be vibrating below 200, which is below courage, etc., okay? So, at the bottom we have shame, which is associated with elimination, humiliation, misery. Then we have guilt, which is associated with destruction, blame, evil. Okay, so the people that vibrate at this level are the people that are more likely to blame victims. Okay, victim blaming from the people that are vibrating at guilt. So we move up to apathy. This is where most homeless people are vibrating at. It's associated with despair, hopelessness, etc. And yeah, I think I'm going to stop here because we're going to be here all day. But just take a screenshot so that you can refer to this image in the future. So if you look at the map of consciousness itself, you're going to see different calibrations of consciousness that people tend to vibrate at, okay? And the author said that the overwhelming majority of the global population, basically 85% of the population, are calibrated at below 200. And in order for you to get to 200, you have to vibrate at the frequency of courage, all right? And most people are not there, especially men. So on average, women tend to vibrate a little bit higher than men. Okay, women tend to vibrate. Women find it much easier to get to the frequency or the calibration of above 200, which is courage, because it takes courage to do shadow work. It takes courage to do inner work. It takes courage to admit that something is wrong. It takes courage for you to do something about it. So when it comes to different expressions of empathy, you can go high on the scale up to 500, which is the frequency of love, or you can go below 200, because there are some negative forms of empathy where people have so much empathy that they ignore their self, they sacrifice themselves, they end up people pleasing, and they get themselves in a lot of trouble. And a lot of women tend to end up in situations like that. So basically, it's empathy that becomes an enmeshment of codependency. So that's not the empathy that you are looking for, because empathy can easily turn into martyrdom, people pleasing, absorbing other people's pain, etc. So when you get to this level, it's no longer true empathy. It's basically empathy that's ego driven or fear based. And like fear based identification with other people's suffering. So what you need is empathy that is rooted in compassion. And empathy that is rooted in compassion is heart-centered. This empathy is arising from a place of genuine desire to understand and uplift. And it also comes from a place of unconditional love. And that empathy calibrates at 500, okay? There is another form of empathy, which is the psychological, logical type of empathy, or cognitive empathy. So that's like the therapist that has empathy and understand, what their client is going through. So that type of empathy usually calibrates at around 400 on the map of consciousness scale. So now that that's out of the way, let me go and, share my thoughts about, the issue with the incident with Cassie, or, whatever the hell is going on with these men and Cassie, all right? So the question is, why do so many men struggle with empathy in cases like Cassie? Okay, Cassie is not the first and she's not going to be the last, all right? These men all saw R. Kelly urinated on that 14-year-old girl, and they don't see what he did is wrong. They don't think that what Diddy did was wrong. They think it was her fault and it was her choice, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I saw a man commented and said that she had a choice. it was still a choice. But those were the same men that got so angry when Kanye West came on here and said that slavery was a choice. But I digress. Empathy requires a certain level of consciousness, and it's not easy for most people to get to, especially people, particularly men, that grew up in patriarchal society that represses, emotions, empathy. They see that stuff as weakness, okay? They see it as a weakness. So many of these people, especially men, they still operate below 200. Remember that in order to get above 200, you have to start calibrating at courage. All right. So they cannot do it because it takes courage to admit that what was done was wrong. It takes courage to admit that they were wrong. These states like pride, anger, fear, shame, guilt, it doesn't allow empathy. So it doesn't matter what you do, how much you explain and how much you argue back and go back and forth with them, they will never understand. So this is the reason why you can't be around someone who is on a lower frequency than you. You just can't, because you can't understand them. You just can't, and they can't understand you. They cannot. The women that these men should be dating and giving attention to are the very women that they don't even want, which is ironic when you really think about it. So the fact that these states doesn't allow empathy, what it does, it distorts it. They use mockery, shame, guilt, or whatnot. So I'm going to give you an analogy that the author used in the book. Okay, so it's the bum on the street analogy. So let's say that you are taking a walk in an upscale, wealthy neighborhood, and then you see a bum on the corner, and he's all dirty, he looks homeless, might be a drug addict, who knows. Your first reaction, how you feel and what you think about the person, will tell you exactly where you're calibrating at. So what most people would do, they would be disgusted, or they're going to blame the person like, you, why don't he get a job, this is his fault that he's in this situation, blah blah blah. So that is someone that think like that is someone that is calibrating in at the level of shame, or no, not shame, shame and guilt. Yeah, shame and guilt, which is so low, like it's around 50. Okay, which is funny because homeless people tend to calibrate at around the same, which is around between 40 and 50. For me, if I saw something like that in an upscale neighborhood, the first thing I'm going to think, well, would be like, oh, that's interesting, because that's a wild card. I'm not expecting to see that in an upscale neighborhood. So I'm going to think like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder how we ended up here. And then most likely I'm going to go about my business. So these men that are vibrating below 200, they literally cannot see a higher level of consciousness. They cannot empathize with Cassie. So that means that in order for them to have true empathy, means that they have to calibrate at the vibration of love, and most of them will never get there in their entire life. They do not know how to love because they don't have it. They cannot do it. So this is one of the reasons why I don't believe in love between a man and a woman, because that requires more than sexual activity. It requires a high level of consciousness for a man to actually love you, and not love you with conditions that, oh, you're not a hoe, or this and that. Like you all know these weird conditions that these men have. It requires him to see your humanity, and this is what Cassie husband saw. Cassie husband is rare. Okay, so the men that they love to call Sims, the men that truly see past a woman's flaws, see past her traumas and her baggages, and supports her on her healing, etc. They don't understand it. They don't understand it, and they're like, what the hell is wrong with this guy? This guy is a sip. So that's the only conclusion that they can come to, because they are not on his level of consciousness. They do not understand it. Men do not understand forgiveness, especially when it comes to women, because they lack empathy. Also, we have to remember that patriarchy teaches men to distrust vulnerability. So most men were thought that, being vulnerable or expressing care, especially expressing care to your woman, is seen as a weakness. So when they see women like Cassie and Sierra finally find love, they don't understand it because they do not know how to process it. Also, when these women finally find the strength to come forward and claim that they were, abused, etc., they don't see it as courage. And that is courage. That is courage. Cassie is vibrating higher than most of these men that are pointing fingers and projecting shame and guilt onto this woman. When she finally comes forward, they don't see courage, they see a loss of control. And that makes them deeply uncomfortable. It really does. So, because it makes them uncomfortable, because again, it would mean that they will have to admit that Diddy was wrong, or they were wrong, or they are just like Diddy. Like they will have to admit that. So to regain control, they are going to blame the victim. Okay. And that's a way for them to not to have to confront their shadow. If you look at the way men write stories and the way they write men, these men are not confronting their shadows. All they focus on is the good side of men. The guy is a hero. He's here to save the day, and he's going to protect and do all of that stuff. Like any hero movie or any movie where there's a male hero is that, okay? The villain and the hero is the same person. I do not know if you all know this, but the villain and the hero are the same person. It's a mirror. It's two sides of the same coin. So when you look at movies where the protagonist is a hero and then you have the villain, it's the same person. What the protagonist is doing is coming up against his shadow and defeating his shadow. And most people don't see this. So if men start doing the shadow work, they will see that men like Diddy are wrong for what they're doing. This is why we have this legal system, and a lot of men understand that Diddy is in fact a bad person. He is a supervillain and he needs to be dealt with and need to be taken care of. Some men do understand this, but the men that are vibrating at below 200, vibrating in the frequency of fear, guilt, shame, etc., they're not going to see it. What they tend to do is project the shame, the guilt, and the fear and everything onto women and onto vulnerable people, etc., because they don't want to deal with that. Okay, but that's where they are vibrating at. This is why a lot of these men, they cannot move on, and this is why they cannot find it in their heart to forgive someone, especially women. They can't even forgive themselves. So they would rather compartmentalize that and walk around acting like if nothing happened. But what they do is continuously project these insecurities onto others, especially women, because women are the easier target. We are in a patriarchy after all. So the elephant in the room is the unhealed shame and guilt that these men are dealing with, especially if these are the men that have abused power themselves. A lot of these men are envious of men like Diddy because they don't have the money, the resources, the status, and the power to do what Diddy did to Cassie. They want to be the ones that inflict these horrible traumas onto women, especially women that they are angry with or jealous of, because we all know the story of the guy in high school who got rejected by the beautiful girls, his type, his preference, and then he goes through in his entire life trying to make money, trying to become successful so that he can turn around and take revenge on these women by abusing them. That's what they do. So if they admit that Cassie is innocent, which she is, I don't care how you put it or whatnot, she's innocent. And the people who get it. The people that don't, the people that are vibrating below 200 are not going to get it because they lack empathy. So if you see them in the comment section, just know where they're vibrating at. And this is one of the reasons why I always encourage you ladies to never argue with men, especially men on the internet, in the comment section. Don't do it because they are not on your vibrational level. So if they admit Cassie is innocent, then that would mean that they will have to admit, or he will have to admit that he is guilty. Like he's guilty too, just like Diddy. A lot of them are. And then we have to consider the cognitive dissonance with male idols. These men that they put on a pedestal, these men that they worship, men like Diddy, Chris Brown, a bunch of toxic men, okay? Meanwhile, they absolutely hate men like Russell Wilson. So for a lot of men like Diddy represents power, status, and dominance. The alpha male, right? So to admit that this man is evil, admit that this man is abusive, what it does is threatens their worldview. So it's much easier to attack the victim than to dismantle their illusion of power or the illusion of the powerful alpha male. So men like Cassie's husband, because these men are like, if it was me, I would have divorced her. Like, imagine divorcing your wife because your wife is a victim, your wife has been abused. I mean, the reason why we don't understand it is because we are vibrating higher than these people. Okay, these are low level creatures. That's what they are. All right. But men like Cassie's husband, like his name is escaping me. I'm so sorry, y'all. Someone type his name in the comments. But these men are not extinct. They are just rare, right? They're not extinct. They do exist. Okay. So men like this guy must have done the inner work themselves. Maybe they went through trauma themselves and they were able to do the inner work or heal and move on. This is something very difficult for men to do because men be holding on to trauma and grudges from all the way back to high school, and they be in their 40s and can't let that shit go. Have you ever noticed that men cannot let go? They cannot let go because they cannot forgive. All right? They cannot forgive and they do not have empathy. They don't even have it for themselves. But it's just funny that, these men will come in here and they'll be like, oh, when I was in high school, females rejected me and I was a good guy and they rejected me because I'm a nerd or I'm lame. Like, just silly ass excuses. Like, there are so many women that would like to date them, but they can't see it. They cannot meet these women where they are because they are too low. They are not working through their traumas. They are not healing. So, like a man like Cassie's husband is a man that vibrates in love. He's strong enough to be gentle. He's strong enough to be there for her, supporting her all the way. I mean, I hope that's what it is. But these men do exist. So when I talk like this, people think that it's all man hating. The people think that the what I'm saying here is man hating. It's not. It's a spiritual crisis. People don't want to understand other people. People lack empathy. People are rooted in hatred, anger, envy, etc. People are not vibrating higher. They are not leveling up their consciousness. So this is why we have these problems. These men really believe that women that been through sexual trauma, like rape and stuff like that, they believe that these women don't deserve to move on. And they feel like these women don't deserve to be forgiven and move on and heal and, start over with a fresh slate, start afresh, get a new husband, a new family, a whole new life, turn over a whole new leaf. They don't believe that women should do that, and that is concerning. It's really concerning. It really is, and I don't understand where all of this bitterness is coming from because they are bitter. They really believe that women should be out here, like these women that experience this type of stuff should be out here on the street destitute and live in shame, live in the vibrational frequency of shame and guilt for the rest of their life. And this is one of the reasons. And if you ever wonder why men come at you with the same thing over and over, because whatever they do is textbook. It's textbook. And hear me out, okay? Men usually attack women, and when they attack you about your looks. Okay, they attack you with guilt or shame because they want you to be ashamed of something. Like they want women to be ashamed constantly. They want you at a low level. If you're a low level vibrationally, you are so much more easy to have access to because they simply cannot vibrate higher. All right, this is one of the reasons why men love to this is one of the reasons why men cannot promise you loyalty, fidelity, and that type of stuff is because they cannot do it. They cannot give you the things that you want. Okay, love, care, empathy, understanding, joy. They cannot bring that. Okay, so for the longest time, the only thing that they can bring is resources, paycheck or whatnot. And women no longer need that. They have nothing. They have nothing because they refuse to level up their consciousness. So the victim blaming is not surprising to me because victim blaming means that when you blame the victim, you put that victim in, or you project shame and guilt onto that victim. The shame and guilt that you are currently vibrating at. Because it takes courage to admit that maybe I need a new perspective. Maybe my thinking process was wrong. Maybe I need to rethink the way I view things. It takes courage to do that. And they are not going to get there. They're going to be stuck in pride, anger. This is all they give. Okay, they're very prideful. They're always angry. That's the only emotions that they are able to express properly. And they use guilt and shame to control women. That's what I have to say for today. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Again, I recommend that you go get this book. This book is actually really good. I'm already halfway through. Like I'm not done reading. Like I'm already halfway through. I'm gonna leave a link in the description for anyone that would like to purchase this book. But yeah, that's all I have to say for today. Thanks for listening.